you're interested in developing a program of research that's going to go forth for quite some time, then you have about three options. One, you can only involve other people at your level, maybe mid-level and advanced, and they do all the work. Well, that's probably not going to work too well anymore because of the number of hands you have to have on a project. So most people then have two choices. One, they wind up bringing in PhDs, for example, who are postdoctoral individuals, or people who are not tied necessarily to an institution or university. So that's one way. So they avoid the challenging process of actually training from a basic perspective students, and they don't get into all that difficulty and challenge. That'll work to a degree, but the problem with that approach, in my opinion, is you don't have people who are going to be necessarily carrying this on well after you've left the arena. So at some point early on, I decided that bringing doctoral students on, giving them the training, education, experiences that I thought would be very helpful to them going forward. They also would give back to the program in terms of their own energy and work, and that I was sending them out with the potential for continuing the work beyond what we did. I would advocate probably for a person mid-career doing some of both. That is, having some of the postdocs in there who can help you with the training of the pre-docs, but also always having some pre-docs in the program for it gives a freshness to the program, it gives a continuity to the program, it gives back to the field over and beyond the research. And in some fields like psychology, they even bring in undergraduates extensively. And they're training them so they can go out and get the training as a PhD. So it's investment in the present versus investment in the present and into the future. And I can understand why people might stay away from the pre-doc because of the work involved, but I would encourage people to do that at least as part of their program because of the long-term positive contribution to both the PI, the professor, as well as to their program, as well as to their discipline. Well, let me start off from the selection of the PhD student. When I was at Syracuse, there was a football coach by the name of Dick McPherson, and I really liked to hear this guy interviewed because he always had pearls of wisdom from his experience. And one day he was during the time when they were selecting next year's incoming football players, he was interviewed by a young, eager reporter. And the reporter put the mic up in front of his face and said, Coach McPherson, how are those athletes shaping up for next year's program? And he gently put out his hand on the reporter's arm and said, son, I'm not recruiting athletes. I'm recruiting football players. What does that mean relative to this question? That I'm not recruiting rocket scientists, just people who are bright. Intelligence is important, but I'm trying to recruit future professoriate. I'm trying to get people who will be good teacher scholars. So I'm looking for the following types of things as I talk to them. Yes, I'm looking for they've got to have a certain floor, basement level of intellect. But I'm looking for things like how well do they tolerate ambiguity, because research by its very nature is ambiguous. If you insist on must have always a cut and dried, yes or no, categorical response to things, perhaps research isn't your calling. Second, I'm looking for them to have a dedication to a lifetime of self-education. Do they seem to be reading broadly within and outside the profession? Are they reading fiction as well as nonfiction? Because there are many, many bon mots that one can collect from that, because many of the people who write in fiction know a lot about the human condition that scientists don't necessarily know about. And since we're studying in speech-language pathology the human condition, knowing as much as you possibly can about it is a good idea. I'm looking for evidence that they're persistent, that they can face obstacles and persist in the face of sometimes difficulties, challenges, pushback, failure. And so those are some of the core things I'm looking for. Now, once I have found that type of person, and they have apparent to me a driving curiosity about the world around them and what they say they want to study, I will try to encourage him to come work with us. And I will do everything I can to help them develop themselves at the raw platform becoming a teacher scholar. The challenges in that process, they run everything from just getting them money to fund their work, to keep them on track. By that I mean they're making successful progress towards completion of their degree. Because many people have great grandiose ideas, but they don't have 15 years to study them. They've got about 5 years on average. Keeping them on track, keeping them supported, giving them a sense of the whole. That is, although we're working in a fairly narrow space, I want you to have a very wide perspective on that narrow space. That's a real key thing. And I want you to realize that you're in a department and you have to interact with people and you have to learn how to get along with people, because that's going to be exactly the same thing that you're going to be faced with once you graduate. So those are some of the key things. And then there could be unique things. There could be a death in the family that you have to help them get over if they can. I try to bring people in that don't need hiatuses in their training. And I try to work with them on the front end to figure that out. By that I mean they decide that maybe this isn't for them. Some people can take hiatuses and come back refreshed. But generally it's been my experience when they take hiatuses, they probably are going to have trouble finishing. Because certainly in the job, there's not a lot of room for hiatuses, although there are sabbaticals. So those are some of the challenges that I have dealt with. Well, first of all, I try to be what I want them to be. I try to model. Words that stop at words, that's about all they impact. But your example, your model, I think is crucial. So I try to model for them what I think they need to learn. And the first thing they have to learn is time management. And this, I'm sure you've heard this on a number of occasions. But how can you train people to manage their time when you can't manage your time? So you have to demonstrate a persistence. You have to demonstrate. I was told once that some of the most famous of all scholars went to work every day like a greengrocer. That they'd get up, go to work, and come back in the evening. And I think that's very true. That teaching them that this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And that it's not necessarily the tortoise and the hare, but that it's a steadiness, it's a seriousness. And I talked to them about this. I talked to them about the need to consult with other people on topics. And that can be hard because that takes time, right? It sort of works against the very thing I'm trying to get them to move forward. I try to meet with each of them 1 to sometimes 3 times a week, but generally at least once a week throughout the time they're working with me. Whether it's working on whether it's beginning the project, in the middle of a project, finishing the project, and that is keeping contact with them is very important. And again, but modeling what you say you want. So if you want people to be persistent, if you don't show up for work more in the day and a half a week, that's not modeling what you're trying to get across to them. You want them to learn, as I said, working with other people. That's crucial because that's the only way they're going to learn to develop a science team once they get out. You are trying to read broadly and encourage them to read broadly, but you're also trying, and this is important, you're also trying to get them to understand the difference between knowledge consumption, which is reading, knowledge dissemination, which is teaching, knowledge production, which is research, and knowledge application, which is clinical. And some people get very confused between reading a lot and producing a lot, or talking a lot and producing a lot. And I try to help them understand that. Talk is good. We require that and encourage that, but up to a point. After that point, you need to start producing and putting things down on paper, presenting them. Don't confuse the presentation with the publication, though. And so following it from the very early stages of the inception of an idea all the way through to the final, it's been accepted. And that's a persistence. That's a kind of a long-term approach to things, and keeping their eye on the prize, which is being able to report that which they do. Because if that which they do sits in their file drawer in their office, no one will know that which they've done. And they will have a very short career. So I'm trying to get, and some of them don't believe they can do this. I mean, they're very bright and they're hardworking, but they don't really believe they've got the wherewithal to take all these ideas, put them together, and actually report them to their peers. And I try to help them learn that, yes, they can do that. It's a very satisfying thing.